Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another incredible virtual discussion movie talk on this monumentous day, the 75th birthday of one Pedro Almodóvar. Hi there, I'm Anthony DeSanctis, programming manager here at Arts Quest. We are in for an incredible talk celebrating the life of this brilliant auteur. But first, before I introduce our curators of the Lehigh Valley LGBTQ plus film series and Cinema Significa, I'd like to welcome my programming assistant, Sarah Bess, onto the call. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Sarah. So for those of you watching on Zoom or on the Facebook chat, if you have a comment or anything, leave it there, and Sarah will make sure that we read it on air later on. We'll come back to Sarah later, but thank you very much, Sarah. All right, now I would like to welcome. This is exciting. This is one of our first joint productions, if you will. I'd like to welcome from the Lehigh Valley LGBTQ plus film series and Cinema Significa. Please welcome Alessandra Finelli, Kathy Ford, and Francisco Aguilar. Hey, everybody. Do I have to unmute you all? Yeah? Okay. You don't want to do this whole talk silent and I'll just
I
mouth the
figured we
words?
could just do it through interpretive dance.
Yeah, right. I'm all about that. So, all right, cool. So guys, this is a big day. 75th and 75th anniversary. Well, technically,
Of his life.
yeah,
75th anniversary of his life.
yes, cool. So yeah, let's get to it. How do we start celebrating?
How do we start celebrating? Well, first, I think it's important to kind of just backpedal a little bit and talk about who actually is Pedro Almodóvar and why today. So, like Anthony said, in a weird way, sorry, Anthony,
Sorry,
it
it's
is
fine.
the 75th anniversary of his life because today, September 25th, is actually his birthday. And we, meaning curators for the Lehigh Valley LGBTQ plus film series and Cinema Significa, thought it would be a really cool opportunity to join forces and have this virtual discussion. So maybe we should introduce ourselves and then we'll talk about Pedro. So my name is Alessandra Finelli. I am one of the co-curators for the Lehigh Valley LGBTQ plus film series, and I also am one of the co-curators for Cinema Significa, which highlights Latin and Hispanic film. And now I'm going to popcorn to Kathy.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. My name is Kathy Ford. I am with Alessandra on the Lehigh Valley LGBTQ plus film series. Very happy to be here. Very excited to have this discussion about such a wonderful filmmaker.
And that leaves
Francisco.
Franny.
Yeah, so I'm part of Cinema Significa. I'm a local filmmaker, curator with Cinema Significa, programmer at Civic Theater, and just like overall artist, photographer and a writer as well. And yeah, I'm excited. Pedro's a really cool guy. So
Awesome, fantastic. And we'll definitely get into this, but so you're talking about Civic, that's actually where I saw my first Pedro Almodóvar film. So
oh,
yeah, let's just get into it. Today's his birthday. So Pedro Almodóvar is a renowned Spanish filmmaker, and he's made significant contributions both to Latin and queer cinema. So that's the reason why we wanted to just bring this together. If you're good at math, you probably already know this, but if you're not like me, then you need to know that he's born in 1949 in Calzada de Calatrava. He emerged as this like pioneering voice in the late 20th century, and his bold storytelling really just was groundbreaking in lots of different facets with the different characters that he was choosing, the styles that he directed in, the themes that he utilized. So a lot of his work, if not all of his work, we're talking about identity, sexuality, complexities of human relationships. So he really has been this key figure in queer representation in film, and then obviously with his ethnic background in Hispanic and Latin cinema as well. So we wanted to just talk about his distinctive style, themes, the influence on contemporary cinema, and all that fun jazz. Things that I kind of wanted to focus on tonight, and we'll get into this when we're talking about our favorite films. And Franny and I actually curated All About My Mother. We showed that for that May of this year. I don't know time. Time doesn't exist.
It was, yes.
And yeah, was it great? And just how he's able to mark his distinctive style with these bold color palettes, the intricate narratives. It's always melodrama and dark humor, and then these strong female characters with these demonstrating liberation, familial bonds, and the impact of societal norms. So I just wanted to just bring that in into establishing the context of why this is relevant specifically to our series. We felt very passionate about showing that film and just talking and celebrating him in general. He's received critical acclaim, multiple Oscars. He's this transformative figure in the film industry. So Kathy and Franny, do you have anything else before we get into maybe our favorite films?
I guess for me, you know, being introduced to him in the 80s, but then realizing that he started in the 70s. And like you mentioned, some of his passions and experimental films during the day, how groundbreaking they were. And yet, so poignant at times too, in the middle of the neuroses and other things. So I'm looking forward to just getting more into both of your perspectives and if there's any feedback from our audience, because we all see one film and we come out with so many different things, but you can talk about one film for an hour, never mind his whole legacy. So this should be good.
Thanks, Kathy. Fran, did you have any thoughts before we get into our favorite films?
Kind of to go off that, it's pretty interesting. Like I didn't really get into Pedro until kind of like this year when we programmed All About My Mother. Then I was like, yeah, let me go into his career, you know. So I don't know, it's gonna be very interesting to see two ends of it. Someone who's been with him for most of his career and someone who's kind of just discovered him.
All right. Okay. So I'm not, I've kind of forgotten if we were able to get some fan feedback over what their favorite films are, but I think we're going to try to do that later to talk about, I'm getting a thumbs up. We're going to try to guess what their favorite films are, but right now, I think we should go over what ours are. So do you want me to go first, Kathy and Franny?
Sure.
All right. So, to no one's surprise, it is Volver. I love Penelope Cruz, and that's something I also wanted to highlight with these relationships that Almodovar has, specifically with Antonio Banderas and Penelope Cruz. I used to like if you like cover like all of my face in high school, people used to think I look like her. I think it's because I wore a lot of eyeliner, but I really enjoyed her as an actress, and it took me a while to realize it was because I was seeing a lot of film that she was in, and it was all Almodovar films. But Volver, especially, like as a Spanish student in high school, this was used for educational purposes, and I was very taken aback by some of these crazy plot points. But it's a testament to how Almodovar really is fascinated and exemplifies this theme of just the strong female. So mine is Volver. Who wants to go next?
Go ahead, Franny.
Okay, cool. Um, Mine's Pain and Glory. That's kind of like the one I started with, when because I heard that it was kind of like very autobiographical. So I was like, well, that's kind of the way to go. But before watching that movie, I read a New Yorker like profile on him, and it was really interesting watching the movie and yeah, just seeing all these little details that he's mentioned throughout like interviews throughout the like decades come into the film. And oh well, like at the end of the movie, you see how like meta the film is, how like a lot of the film was kind of just part of another film that he was making in the movie. And I thought that was just really interesting because being a filmmaker, it kind of just put it in perspective how like, yeah, we're kind of like processing our own life as like stories, and that's kind of like how you keep moving forward. So it was just interesting to see it end that way too. But yeah.
All right. We also want to hear, if possible, from Anthony and Sarah. Anthony, what is your favorite Almodovar film?
Well, first off, Franny, I just want to say that I loved Pain and Glory, and honestly, like this is gonna sound weird because we're celebrating this man's work, but after seeing Pain and Glory, I honestly wanted that to be his last film. I heard rumors of it, and I was like, this is like that mic drop movie. This is my life in a nutshell. If I end it here, perfect. However, he keeps making movies, and I'm very okay with it. Please make more. So mine, funny, it's actually one of the first films I ever watched at Arts Quest. It's actually The Skin I Live In. Yeah, I really liked seeing him with a bit more of like a sinister twist to him, but still honoring all of the themes and whatnot he puts in his movie. And also, like, I may be a little biased because one of my favorite movies is Eyes Without a Face, and this kind of felt like a little bit of a tribute to that. But
Hmm.
also recently, I just want to say I just watched Talk to Her for the first time this year, which I thought was breathtaking. There's this song in the middle of the movie that I do not understand a single word to, but it like literally touched my soul. And I like can hear it in my head and I tear up thinking about it, even though I do not understand it. And I have watched that YouTube clip of that scene so many times just to keep go back to that. Great movie if you haven't seen it. So I guess I cheated and gave you two. I'm sorry.
Unacceptable.
I'm
Sarah, are
sorry.
you here? Do you want to share what yours is?
Yeah, I guess I'm not super deep on the Almodovar filmography. I'm primarily familiar with The Skin I Live In and All About My Mother as two films that have very complicated and problematic fascinations with trans femininity. Um, and they're interesting to me in that light, I guess, especially The Skin I Live In as kind of this like, forced feminization story by a cis director. That's I don't know. I know a lot of trans people who have very complicated relationships to this movie, some who really love it and some who really hate it. And I think for me, it's like I'm like there's a fascination with trans femininity there, and I'm fascinated with that fascination, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I also think just in general, and I've noticed this along, and maybe it's because I was exposed to Almodovar in at such a young age. I feel like I'm like a film, like if I had my ideal genre of film, trauma is in the title of that genre. Like I'm just like I need to see this. I think Sarah put it very correctly. I agree. The fascination with the fascination of it. So. Awesome. Okay, thanks for sharing, everyone. So, knowing what all of ours are, I was kind of,
I
I had like three in my head about what I think.
Alessandra, you didn't get mine.
Oh, Kathy, go ahead. Oh my gosh.
That's okay because it was very close to being Vauvert. So, but it's not
Mm,
because, like you, Penelope Cruz warms my heart. Uh, so, and it was also close to being Parallel Mothers, but it's the first movie I've seen by Almodovar, which was all about my mother. And I mean, it was close to Women on the Verge, but I think all about my mother. It just was so much of a transformative type of film. It starts out, with the main character, and then all of a sudden, it's whiplash, and then you're taken on this journey about women, all sorts of women, trans women, uh, strong women, complicated women. Penelope Cruz is in that. I thought she was wonderful in that as well. And just his perspective. And again, this was 1989 to have such a movie about women, strong movie about women and mothers in particular. And I think this is the only film I watched uh, that during the credits I cried because he does such a poignant, dedication to women, uh, women who want to be mothers, men who act as women, and he goes through a few names: Gina Rowlands and Betty Davis, and then this I had to write it down: Romy Schneider, who was a 1950s German French actress who was very famous then. And just like Franny said earlier, then you go and you see what was all that was all about with this particular actress. But I'm glad he won the Academy Award for this movie, Best International Film. And I just thought it was wonderful, every aspect of it. So that would be my favorite.
all right. So now that I can finally see, I had everything. Zoom, you'd think I'd know by now for 3, 4, 17 years into Zoom and using it extensively. But now that I have gallery mode and I can see everyone, sorry about that, Kathy.
That's okay.
Awesome. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's actually a really cool segue because we identified some cool trivia and some fun facts. about Almodovar to kind of continue on this birthday celebration. And one of those things that I wanted to share was that his mother does make some cameo appearances in his film, as does his brother. But Kathy and Adriana, oh my gosh, and Franny. By the way, we didn't mention Adriana. Adriana is another
Yeah.
co-curator on Lehigh Valley's LGBTQ plus film series. She unfortunately couldn't join us this evening. But Franny and Kathy, are there any fun facts that you have found about Almodovar that you were like, whoa, we should talk about this? Because I know I found some cool things.
I think one thing I came across, and I don't know if it's about him, but again, it has to go back to Penelope Cruz, that um, before she met him, she watched several of his movies. And being that she was pursuing an acting career, always dreamt of working for him. And she knew before meeting him that they would hit it off and they would have a great career, because she saw the movie High Heels and just fell in love with that movie, fell in love with his storylines, and thought, this would be a perfect fit for me. And then when they met, it's like they knew each other and they had this awesome career. So I thought that was something that was interesting. I didn't know until now.
Very cool. Franny, did you find anything?
Yeah, I have two really quick ones. One is that he's deaf in one ear, which I thought was kind of crazy. I
Hmm.
had no idea. Um, and the second one is that he dislikes biopics so much. He has a clause in his will that no one can make a movie about him once he passes, which is interesting to think about because then he made Pain and Glory. So it's like he kind of did it, and then he was like, no one touched my life again. That's pretty, it says a lot of thing about a person, specifically him, who
Mm.
comes off as like a very chill person, but when you read about how he directs, he's very like controlling. It's interesting, it's also kind of like a bigger, it makes me think about Pain and Glory differently also, you know.
Sure. Isn't that, I feel like there was a reaction to Rocket Man, right? In that same sense, everyone was like, why is this in creation? Elton is still alive. And then the conversation shifted to being, well, why wouldn't you want to be in control of the narrative that is being told about your life? So maybe, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
interesting though. Um, I found two as well. One, I think I saw this somewhere that he was asked or consulted with to direct Sister Act, which I thought that was interesting. And then another is just in so Fran, you were talking about his directing style, and Kathy, you were talking about his like relationship with these actors. So I found something about his writing style. He often starts writing his films by writing an important scene that ends up in like the middle of the film, which whenever I find like a book I really like or an author I really like or even like a filmmaker I really like, my first question is always like, how does it start? And um, half the time it's always like, well, I know what the ending is like. I know how it's going to end.
Mm.
So I thought it was interesting that he kind of starts with the middle. So okay. We talked a little bit about his awards and accolades, but he has won, I believe it's two Academy Awards, five BAFTA, two Emmys, two Golden Globes, and there was something else. Probably Goya Awards. And I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at my notes. I think it was nine. So very well recognized and decorated. He has an honorary, what's it called? Honorary doctoral degree from Harvard and I think the University of Oxford as well. So
Oh,
he's a
And
very
and his,
decorated man.
Alessandra, if I'm not mistaken, his most recent film, The Room Next Door, right? The Room Next Door, is that it?
I believe
yeah.
that's
Uh,
what it's called. Yeah.
that's what
Mhm.
it's called. Didn't it just win Best Film at one of the most recent
Venice. One of
Yeah.
Venice.
Venice? Right.
Y-
Yes.
Yeah.
Which isn't out until the 25th, I think, of December.
Yeah. I'm told that we can get it in January. Just a little inside scoop. But yeah,
Excellent.
a lot of buzz around that movie. First English
Yeah.
language film, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Very exciting. Anyone else have any fun facts about Almodovar while we're talking about it?
Super random, but I collect a lot of like physical media, and he also does. He has a huge collection of over 3,000 films, which this was stated in 2016, so it's probably closer to like almost 4,000 now. And it's called the DVD Oteca, and it's mostly organized by genre. But then every now and then, if there's like a director that he really wants to like focus on, he'll separate it into that, which is what I do, which I find really interesting. So
Oh, Franny's the next Almodóvar. Okay.
maybe.
Anything else? I have one more if not.
You go ahead.
Sure. So, I think I read this, I forget where I saw this, but it was this idea that his influence has not just like permeated pop culture, but also cuisine. I'm pretty sure Rachel Ray named a dish after him. So that just highlights more of his cultural crossover appeal. So, fun little
Mhm.
tidbit of information. Anyone else have anything fun to share?
I just feel like he's one of those directors. I wouldn't call this a fun fact, but just like a fun observation. Like there are certain directors that I feel they're the stars of the film. You know, it's like you don't go see the new Almodovar movie because so and so's in it. Maybe you do. Maybe you see because Penelope Cruz is in it or another actor. But if Almodovar makes a movie, you pay attention. You know, it's he is the selling point. He's one of those directors, and I think that that's a big deal. Like it's worth celebrating. So
For sure. For sure. And I think his ability to just kind of stay true and true with this authenticity over commercial success is also worth noting. So he is his name, but he's just like, he's there doing his thing, making his films. Awesome. Anything else before we move on to maybe talking a little bit more? We kind of talked about his directing and writing, but just maybe we can dive a little bit deeper on his creative process now that we're on that brain wavelength. Yeah.
Um, I don't know if this fits into where you were going with this, Alessandra, but I did come across this article on a podcast talking about uh, Almodovar's movies and do they make you more neurotic? And they highlight, of course, women on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and many of his films, you'll have that like tempo where it's kind of a slow pace, and then all of a sudden it picks up, and there's so much going on, and it's very emotional, and especially the women get very dramatic, but so does the men. And what I thought about that as I was reflecting on some of his films um, is that I feel great about that part because it gives me like the okay to be neurotic myself when I have to be emotional. You know what I mean? Because so often everyone has to keep it together. And I think in his films, a gift he gives his audience is, you know, it's okay to get a little neurotic. Life is not, this nice, tiny, tidy little room. So I don't know if you all feel that way, but that hit me. And he appreciates, especially the women in his life and the women characters, their emotions and their spontaneity and their camaraderie in a lot of these films. So I thought that was interesting.
Sure, absolutely. That permission that a creator gives audience members, I think, is so valuable. Especially since, how many more great directors, filmmakers do we have? They're like, you know what, women, let's celebrate you. So, yeah. Franny, do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, no, I mean, I really agree though. Like every time I think one of the characters in his movies like has a breakdown or something, you can tell that the filmmaker isn't judging and it's kind of just showing you how it is, like when something happens. And
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things like I think a lot of filmmakers say it where it's like the camera just communicates something without you don't even have to just point it and it's telling you what the filmmaker's feeling. And that's one of those things that yeah, Pedro doesn't judge people's emotions. He's just like, this is how some people react when something like this happens. So,
Something else, and now just kind of getting more into his creative process, I guess. Just my background is in intimacy work, and that's kind of what you were talking about, Franny. Just this ability to just non-judgmental, free-flowing. I think that is also a testament to just his creative process in totality, because starting with this pivotal scene in the middle of his film, and how he is then able to anchor the narrative in emotional truth, that I feel is how you create a character arc. Like, and I think that's such a cool way to do that. I don't know, maybe I'm alone thinking that, but I also think it's important to talk a little bit more about his comedy, whether it's dark humor or his rehearsal time usage, the improv. Who here doesn't love improv? But yeah, anyone have any thoughts on maybe we're talking about like the emotional side. How about like the dark humorous side of Almodovar?
Well, let me ask you this. Have any of you seen this is from like the late 80s, early 90s. I believe it's his first Antonio's first movie. Has anybody ever seen Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down with Antonio Banderas?
Yeah.
No? Okay, so this is like 1989, I think 90 or 91. Basically the plot of the movie is Antonio Banderas is obsessed with this woman. I think she's an actress, and he
Yeah.
kidnaps her until she falls in love with him. And that's the movie. Um,
The two of them, the only one in the screen on the screen, just the two of them, right? For the most of the movie.
Essentially, yes. And in today's society, just saying the plot of that movie sounds disturbing, but the movie's funny. It's kind of strangely charming as it goes on and Antonio grows on you. What I'm trying to get at is, well, that's very disturbing in and of itself. I think in worse hands, that movie could have gone in a completely different direction, if that makes sense. And anyway, I guess you should all watch Time Me Up, Time Me Down. So, yeah.
Yeah. But Anthony, just as far as Antonio Banderas, his first film with um, Almodovar was actually The Labyrinth of Passion.
Oh, okay. My mistake. I apologize. Maybe
He's
it's
the
okay.
no, no, I mean it's really short, and I don't know if anyone have seen that. It's from 1987, 82, I think, and I didn't see it until recently, only because it dealt with uh, a lot of queer characters along the spectrum, and he portrays them in a like punk like atmosphere. There's a punk band, and Antonio Banderas is I don't know if he's 20. He looks so young in this, and he's only in it for a short period of time. But that was his first film. But it dealt with a lot of like the AIDS and it was a very almost like an activist kind of film.
I'll
It
definitely
wasn't
add that to
one
the
of his
list.
best though. It was okay, but he
Okay.
drew since 1982.
Yeah. Okay.
Very
All right.
cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And now we know what kind of movies Anthony's I'm into. I'm kidding. So, more
Criterion
about
put it out. I rented it. Hey, leave me alone. Anyway.
No, Antonio Banderas and Penelope, those are I will say this about like maybe five different actors, but I would watch them eat a sandwich. So like, oh, this is a movie where he's kidnapping somebody and but it grows on you, and I'm down. So yeah, anything else about comedy, about his creative process? Anything else, or maybe another film that you're like, I feel like this is evident in this moment.
I have something to share that kind of relates to this comedy and like
Sure, yeah.
process, but he mentioned in an interview that he sees all of his films, they fall into like three different groups. And the
Mhm.
first one were a decade of like playful films full of humor and like just random like nonsense. And then he said the second one was when he really dove into like melodrama, but then blended that with like the psychological thrillers that he felt from like Hitchcock. And then the third is just he calls it pain is more present, where emotions are less cut with irony, and he's kind of getting rid of a lot of the melodrama. And I just find that really interesting because it kind of relates to like just relating to like just how he sees his life as filmmaking and how it's always like, oh yeah, maybe during my 20s I was a lot more like just open and optimistic, and then I started getting a little more moody. And now that
Mm.
I'm a lot older, he's like, why just kind of say what I feel, show what I really represent. So it's just interesting to see him
What
mention
a,
that.
what a beautiful journey. And that's a great segue because what I was going to next talk about was again this like thematically, like I guess it's identity and reality, but this idea of just blending past, present in narrative, not necessarily autobiographical, but I guess a little bit autobiographical. I'm thinking about Bad Education specifically. And so this is Enrique. He's forced to relive his youth as at a Catholic boarding school. He kind of reconnects with this school sweetheart who is already dealing with the trauma of closeting or sexual orientation. So that's a really cool theme to me, just because of how, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess raw, and like the decision to kind of chronicle someone's adolescence in that way, and then to tie back to what you're talking about, Franny, this idea of just like, what is humanity? Well, yeah, we all start out innocent, and obviously it's more playful, and then some bad things happen, but that's okay because we're just gonna be authentic about it. Are there any movies or moments or maybe some interviews you've watched with Almodovar where you kind of something like that resonated with you, or something on the topic of just identity or reality that you're like, whoa, this dude knows what he's doing?
Mhm. I think I mean, to some degree, in parallel mothers, I think some of that may come through because it's almost like a mirror. The two women, Penelope Cruz and as the older mother, and then there's the young um, girl woman who also they cross paths, and you see them like facing each other in ways that may be reflective, um, and then having the underline of was it the Civil War going on at the time, historically. So I think he's able to bring in, personal stories and then an overall theme of what may be going on historically that also has to be dealt with for some of the cast and characters at the time. So that would be something that just resonated from what you said. And talking about autobiographical, getting back to Pain and Glory, Alessandra, as you were saying, starting in the middle and then working your way out, I found the ending to that just it just surprised me, even though I don't know why I was with the last scene in that film, because you wound up making that movie, even though you didn't know that's what was happening. So he really knows how to tell a story and then even surprise us when we think we know what's happening.
Sure. Anyone else? Identity, narrative that you're like, reality that you're like, this is, I love Pedro for this.
I mean, I would just say that like it's I think I find myself really invested in his characters more than many other filmmakers
Mm.
almost from the beginning, you know? I don't know what it is, maybe because I'm just trying to think of like All About My Mother, for example. I forget the lead character's name, but you're with her from start to finish, and he just essentially, I feel a lot of times he starts the movie ruining a character's life and then builds them back up, if that makes sense. And I can't help but root for them no matter what they're going through, and I think he's very good at that, no matter what kind of sandbox he's playing in. Yeah, I've never had a hard time connecting to a character in a Pedro Almodóvar movie. He makes you care, he makes you feel, even in sinister things like The Skin I Live in. So, anyway.
Cool. So I feel like we've done a really good job just going into what we appreciate about Almodovar and why that has resonated with us. So why don't we take an even further step back to see how he even got there? So talking about maybe his influences and his collaborators, starting with maybe his influences. So we talked a little bit about, or we at least acknowledged where he came from, but I definitely think that the fact of where he grew up and the time in which he grew up, so his early life in Spain during the Franco regime, definitely and profoundly impacted his worldview and the way that and the stories that he decided to tell. I think I would almost call it like a rebellious spirit in his storytelling, which I think directly transcends into this um, exploration of themes such as sexuality, identity, and personal and freedom. Um, I would say that other influences, the melodrama. I'm a sucker for a good soap opera. I feel like that deep affection that he has for melodrama definitely tied back to how different classic films that he has cited, and television soap operas as being influential in shaping his narrative style. And I think, obviously those can go really south very quickly, but they allow you to explore these really intense emotional landscapes, and he does a really good job of still infusing that humor and satire, and Antonio Banderas doing weird things that are kind of icky in 2024, but it's still funny. So there's that, and then there was something else. Oh, um, literature and art. I also feel like that those influences in his filmmaking, just with the color palettes that he uses, I would argue that Dali makes is pretty apparent in his work. He just has a lot of vibrancy in the cinematography that I think echo the emotional depths that he's exploring. So anyone else have any thoughts on, oh yeah, I can clearly see, if you could agree, you could completely disagree with me and say I don't see any of those influences, or yeah, maybe I see that in this film, or is there anything else that you feel is pretty apparent has influenced his work at all?
Yeah, I agree that like kind of like him just being born in that era and like that those cities directly impacted where like who what type of films he made. Because he even mentioned that he describes like the Spanish father as very oppressive and repressive, and because he mentioned that while the men were like at war and working, the women were the ones who were like at home, like nurturing and dealt with birth, relationships, and death. And as he calls them, the real problems. And that's you can see how like, growing up, he's like, oh, these are the real issues of life. Let me make movies about this and show people like what life is really like, not just like the big explosions and stuff like that. So, but that's something that he only could have thought that because of the time period he grew up in and how he grew up in that time period.
Sure. Kathy, do you have any thoughts on influences at all?
Um, well, across a few of the movies, and particularly, I guess, in Pain and Glory, you see the characters constantly, some of the main characters reading, or it involves some type of attention to either painting or literature, like you said. So even with however he's influenced, you see that coming out in a very significant way. Um, when in Pain and Glory, as a young boy, he's reading, and you have the gentleman who's helping out his mom stop and paint him, and you have the redness, and some of the colors come out, and then later on it becomes full circle. So these type of things stand out. And Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, again, with all the different uh, dramatic scenes within each one of the women that they highlight, again, it comes back to pace and a lot of, you know, movie within a movie kind of thing.
Sure. All right. Anthony, did you have anything to say about influences at all?
It's funny actually. I have his letterbox, a letter, not his letterbox. That would be nice. But I found a list of his favorite films of all time, and he has a quote: "Cinema has become my life. I don't mean a parallel world. I mean my life itself. I sometimes have the impression that the daily reality is simply there to provide material for my next film." And I'm looking at some of his favorite movies, and according to this list, I'm going to read some of these, and I feel like we'll kind of get the influence of, I think you'll see it. According to this, his favorite movie is Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum. But then there's things like Rules of the Game, All About Eve, Leave Her to Heaven, Out of the Past, Some Like It Hot, Senso, Journey to Italy, The Apartment, To Be or Not to Be, Opening Night, Fellini's Armor Cord. So a little bit of everything, but it feels like from a very specific, like 20, 30 year time frame, which would make sense with what we're talking about. But yeah, I feel like I see little nuggets in all of his movies from all of those.
Some Like It Hot makes so much sense. So that's really cool. Okay, so what about collaborators? So we've talked a lot about Penelope. We talked a little bit about Antonio. We could also talk about Carmen Mara. But these people have, as far as acting collaborations are concerned, they've become regulars in his film, and arguably that, or maybe that's the question. What are your thoughts on establishing these regular actors that you kind of have in all of these films, and how that has impacted his ability to display, to delve into emotional intricacies of his characters or of humanity? Do we think this is so cool, or is this like a weird thing that he does? How do we feel about that?
I mean, my perspective is he must trust them very well because don't, reflecting back how Franny was talking about some of the things that he read about Almodovar, that he may just feel I can really trust this cast of actors for my work, which means a lot to me and is very personal, and then, you know, uh, move forward with them. And something else that jumped out, because we talk about Cruz, we talk about Banderas, but there's also someone else, Rosa De Palma,
Mm-hmm.
um, and she's in 7 movies of his. She's a very distinctive looking actress, and she was in Women on the Verge. She was in Parallel Mothers. And when you look at the characters, whether it is Cruz or any of the others that have had multiple castings in his movie, they never appear to be the same to me. Even though I know it's Penelope Cruz, I don't see her as Penelope Cruz playing the role. I see the the act the character, not that person. So maybe that's it. I don't know.
For sure. Franny, what do you think?
I think it's so cool. I completely relate to why he kind of sticks to the same people because like once kind of like what Kathy says, once you find someone that you trust, it's so much easier to make work together because everyone, you don't have to start from like zero. You kind of keep building off each project and you can keep going to like something new. You grow together instead of just like, all right, here we go again, but I've already been here. You kind of got to catch up. Instead, when you start a new project, we're like, all right, remember what we did before? Let's go off of that. It's so I think it's cool.
Also think it's cool. I wonder if it I wonder about the challenges that it presents. If it's ever like, to what you just said, Franny, but if that's like to a disservice of the piece, of just being like, hey, this is a different story, and you can't just like make sure this is different, and how can we do that? Like I'm wondering about complacency and comfort. Like if it gets too, I don't know, too
Well,
safe.
something I was reading is that the way he directs is I think everything he's ever directed, or every role that any actor's played in one of his movies, he's done the role. Like he's showed them exactly how to do it. But something the actors have mentioned is that you never want to like imitate Pedro. You want to like kind of follow what he's doing, but make it yourself. And I think that kind of shows that Pedro picks people who he trusts, and he's like, I want you to do it like this, but then bring me whatever makes you into the role. And I think that's what kind of helps, once he knows someone, he knows that they'll understand how to read him and then kind of bring in their own into it, but not fully, because it seems like he's someone who doesn't want to lose control over his film, and if he brings in an actor who's like, I'm going to do it my way, he's going to be like, no, no, I don't want it that way.
Interesting.
So
Very
basically like he lays the foundation and the actor builds on it, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. He's very into like every single aspect of the filmmaking. He's there. And I think that makes sense, especially since he started, doing like 6 or like 8 millimeter, like little short films where it's when you do that, you're doing everything. You're shooting, you're editing, you're directing, you're acting if you have to.
Mhm.
And you kind of never let that go. You're always kind of like bigger budgets, less you have to do, but you're always kind of watching. You're like, you can probably do that a little bit different.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Franny. So segueing off of that, talking more about collaborators, what about as far as cinematography is concerned? Do we have any thoughts on the different collaborations he's had in that field? We're talking about like Jose Luis Alcaine, I think more recently Rodrigo Prieto. So although Almodóvar has a very distinct, a very signature visual style, and I think kind of again branching off this idea that he needs to have this strong rapport with different people, different actors, and he needs to be able to trust them. Being able to trust someone to not only capture the color palette and the vibrancy of his storytelling, but also to be able to do so successfully and in a way that enhances the storytelling, I think is something that is very unique. Do we have any favorite collaborators or any thoughts on his collaborations with different cinematographers? Or favorite films that were like, yeah, cinematography in that one, amazing.
I think something interesting is like I don't know if it's a cinematographer or if it's like him, but the way he blocks stuff is very interesting, and it's like not spoken much about. But like I don't know, I was watching The Skin I Live In today, and there's a scene where like the woman who's trapped in the room, he's like Antonio's watching her through like this giant TV, and then he mimics how she's laying down. And it's just like, how do you even think of framing it like that? Where like now the background is the TV frame.
Mm.
It's so cool. Like, and I think it keeps going with that, like how he just sees everything as a film, and he sees like frame within a frame constantly. So
For sure. Okay. So, Kathy, do you have any thoughts on this or any favorite films where you're like, I love the cinematography in this one?
I mean, I don't know. I guess when I think of some of the cinematography, it's irrelevant on who it is because it's always so wonderful. Um, but in particular, you mentioned, I think someone did about short films, and I thought the cinematography in Strange Way of Life was just really intense at times, and whether it was, you know, when the two characters, it's a short film by him, it's set in the Wild West with Ethan Hawke and Pedro Pascal, and they have a relationship. But then when it's taken outdoors, it's just a beautiful scenery. But then you see how that reflects in their relationship. So I don't know. I think that kind of held true for me as far as cinematography. It was a different look, um, that film, than some of his others.
For sure.
I don't know who
Thanks,
the
Kathy.
cinematographer was in that though.
Hmm. Cool, cool. So, tying it back into why we decided to do this virtual talk. So obviously we're involved in two film series that Frank Banco House Cinemas, everyone watching on Facebook through Arts Quest, which I want to make sure before we end this conversation this evening that we make sure to promote upcoming screenings that we're presenting. All of them are free, but before we get to that, just tying it back into why we're doing this. And I think it all comes down to impact on both Latin and queer cinema. So, is there anything that we want to just kind of really hit home with all of the viewers watching right now, just with what he has done and what he is continue to do, maybe for Franny, for like from the perspective of just like filmmakers now, and Kathy just opening doors for this idea of representation in mainstream cinema and challenging stereotypes. Is there anything we want to share with that?
to me, he's just the easiest reminder that like all you got to do is be yourself. Like he became this figure just because he wanted to just tell stories. Like he wasn't like, I'm gonna tell queer and Latin stories. It's just that he happened to tell certain stories and they took off. The world needed that at that time. Um, like he even mentions that like when he first came to America, he was like known as like a gay filmmaker. And to him, he was like, I never thought about that. He was like, in Spain, I'm just me. And then
Mm,
he was
Yeah.
like, I realize in America, you need to be that as a way to like counterculture as a way to fight it. But it was funny, like to him, he's always just kind of been him, and he grew from that. So yeah, when I watch his work, I'm like, even like how does a movie like The Skin I Live In become so popular? Because it's just like something he had like a lot of ideas to tackle with that. And I'm sure a lot of filmmakers that if they were making that movie or writing it, they would have been like, okay, this is maybe too much. This is a little bit weird or something. But look what happened. So
Absolutely. Kathy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at queer cinema or just what Franny was saying, uh, how he perceived himself to just be a filmmaker who happens to be making these movies and who happens to be gay himself when he was in Spain and then over here, again, when he started making some of these films that portrayed the queer community, whether it was trans, lesbian, gay, and the entire spectrum, he did it with such respect as these are just people in our neighborhood. Although, if like when I watched All About My Mother for the first time and saw that the father of the lead character's son is now a trans woman, I was blown away because it just rolled and you saw the challenges that that person was up against, but the woman who's the lead character, he was once her husband, I guess, um, accepted them, and then they went on to then help Penelope Cruz's character, who was pregnant and she had AIDS. And this was, in 1999, was it that I said? And then his first film that dealt with AIDS, and that came out in 1982. Um, and what was nice, we talk about this with our film series, Alessandra. He was unapologetic about it. Yeah, maybe it was stressful and there's a lot of neurosis out there, but be who you are. And where for so much of the queer films that we talk about and highlight, he is one of the leaders in that, that I think probably influenced others to take risks because he was taking risks early on. And have either of you heard of or seen his movie, The Law of Desire? It came out in 1987. I didn't see it, but I'm going to try to track it down, because this was before Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, reading it. And it highlights a love triangle between a director, his male muse, and their the transgender sister of the male. So I mean, it really, again, 1987. These are the characters in this movie, you know. So that's how I see it as far as affecting the area that we highlight in our series.
For sure. That's awesome. Yeah, I agree with both of you. It's about art for me is activism and the advocacy that he's able to just display by focusing on marginalized voices without it just it's not performative. Like Franny said, it's just
Mhm.
that's what he feels. That's who he is. And like Kathy, what you said, it's just it's a very natural thing. And this is just a testament to it. His films clearly encourage discussions surrounding acceptance and understanding, and that really resonates with people. It definitely resonates with us. So, yeah,
And real quick, you just made me think of too. You have to say the same thing about his cast. I mean, Antonio Banderas in 1982 was in Passion of Labyrinth Passion, and he, was gay in that film, played a gay character, and he wasn't afraid. And two, you look at Penelope Cruz in Parallel Mothers, same thing. She continued, although that was in later years, but these actors too that he involved himself with also put themselves out there during these films without concern because they were true to the work of the filmmaker.
for sure. All right. So at this point, I believe there is a top three that we can guess from a poll that was taken last week. And to that, I would love to reintroduce Anthony to kind of walk us through that.
Oh, you shouldn't have. Thank you. Hi there. So last week there were a couple of there was an email survey that went out, a couple posts online. Marketing team gave me a list, and I'm going to reveal the top three films from three to one in that order. Before I do that, I just want to ask the three of you, what do you think those three films are? You can each take turns saying what you think the three are going to be. Whoever wants to go first. You know, I lied. Franny, you're going first.
Okay. I think number one is All About My Mother, then The Skin I Live In, and I'm gonna say Pain and Glory because it's my favorite.
Okay. Kathy, what about you?
I'm going to say it's not the movie that I think I'm the only one who liked, which was I'm So Excited About the Doomed Airplane and the singing flight attendants. It got panned, but I loved it. If you want a really silly movie by him, check I'm So Excited. Um, anyway, I think it is All About My Mother. Um, Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. And because, I don't know, I thought this was a great movie too. Talk to Her. Or Valvera. Oh, I gave four, so sorry.
Okay. We'll allow it. Alessandra, what do you think the three are?
Okay, I am going to say All About My Mother. I'm torn between Bad Education and Talk to Her, but I gotta put Volver over there. So I'm gonna say All About My Mother, Volver, Bad Education.
Okay. All right. Let's do this. I got to share my screen again. All right, good. You can't see the answers. Okay. We're going to do three to one. Okay. We'll take a second to react after each one.
Sure.
So, coming in at number three is Volver.
Yes!
Yeah. All right. This is a great movie. Love this movie. Didn't Penelope Cruz get an Oscar nomination for this?
Yeah.
I believe she
Yes.
did. Yeah.
She did. She should have won it. You know who won it that year? Believe it or not, Alessandra? Reese Witherspoon for Walk the Line.
Oh, Reese.
Right?
I
Anyway.
mean, fine performance, but she's no Penelope.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Number two. I think one of you said this. Women on the verge of a nervous breakdown.
Kathy got that one. Nice, nice.
Yes.
All
You
right.
gotta love the gazpacho, Anthony. You gotta love the gazpacho.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Okay. So before I reveal number one, I want to say there were a couple of votes for surprise votes for Julieta. There were a few for Parallel Mothers, a lot for The Skin I Live In, but number one, I think you all said it, All About My Mother.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kathy, I know you technically said four, but you technically got three of them right. So well done.
I cheated, though.
Kathy wins. Don't
Yeah,
know what you win, but you win.
Yeah. All right. Any surprise with All About My Mother winning?
No, I think we all have it as number one.
Yeah.
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 And none of them, at least I don't grow tired of watching.
No, I agree.
Okay.
So,
Well, thanks so
Alexandra,
much for sharing that, Anthony.
I have a question for Alessandra.
Yeah.
Before Volvar came up. There were some really great lines in that movie, in the script. There's one part of that really made me laugh. And I don't know if you were going to recall it, but it was when Penelope Cruz and one of her friends are working the restaurant because they had the guys from the construction company coming in to have lunch and dinner, and it's at the big party at the end. And her friend, who's the bartender, turns to her and says, "Between your cleavage and my mojitos, we could become millionaires." And I thought, oh my gosh, that just tickled me because, you know, I'm thinking of him writing it and what a, you know, even though this is a pretty serious film at times, he does have these lines that come in that bring such a sense of humanity and laughter to it in serious situations. So anyway,
Absolutely. No, it's my fave. I remember being in high school watching it and just being like, where has he been all my life? And then obviously I started this obsession with Penelope Cruz. But on the topic of celebrating directors on their birthdays, I think this would be a great time to mention that, again, Cinema Significa, which is the Latin and Hispanic film series that Franny and I co-curate, on Wednesday, October 9th, we will be screening Pan's Labyrinth as a part of a Guillermo del Toro's 60th birthday celebration. So make sure you acquire tickets to that. The screening is also free. All of our screenings, we do have the option and the ability to collect items to benefit Hispanic Center Lehigh Valley's food pantry. So those are typically just non-perishable, culturally appropriate items with favor to Goya products and even clothing that's in good condition. We accept that and we bring it on over to the center. So please consider doing that and checking out Cinema Significa at steelstacks.org/film. You can join our email list. We only send you emails about upcoming screenings. Franny, do you want to tell them what we're doing on November 2nd?
Yeah, we're doing Coco for Dia de los Muertos. Uh, I mean, I don't know. Coco's like an all-time great movie. It makes me cry every single time. It's honestly the first movie I remember like watching like commercial movie that I was like, oh my gosh, there's my grandma. You know, there's me, there's like my aunts and stuff. So, I think it was also just like kind of good timing because I think that came out 2016 or 17.
Mhm.
That's when I was kind of getting more into film. So seeing that, I was like, oh, there's this other world I can explore, and then I got into like the voice actors and found like what they're into, and it was cool to see a Latin cast. So I'm excited to really show that movie.
For sure. Now, this is happening on November 2nd. However, it is a day after Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. So that's also a little tie-in for why we decided to choose that film for that slot. And talking more about why and how we love to appreciate directors in the Lehigh Valley LGBTQ plus film series. On Wednesday, October 16th, we will be presenting No Straight Lines, The Rise of Queer Comics, with a special virtual interview that Kathy and I had the pleasure of conducting with the director, Vivian Clymer. So we really hope that you join us for that as well. Again, this series completely free. You just need to make sure that you register and acquire tickets. Same deal, go to steelstacks.org/film and look for the Lehigh Valley LGBTQ plus film page, and you can subscribe to our email list. We won't solicit you further than just letting you know what we have coming up. So, Kathy, now that we talked about our October screening, do you want to tell the people what we're doing on Sunday, December 1st?
yes, we are going to be showing the film Young Rebels. It I caught that film at New Fest about a year or two ago, and it was wonderful. I think it's set in the 60s, maybe. I know this is one that Adriana has been working hard at securing. So please come and check that out. It should be a very good film for you to watch. It was very much a breakthrough film. I can't think of the director off the top of my head. Maybe Anthony, you know, but
It's Julian Jessen, I believe is his name.
yeah.
Isaac Julian. I'm sorry, Isaac Julian.
So check that out as well. And the interesting about the rise of queer comics is that they are artists. They're not comedians. It's comic strip type retrospective on. So.
All right. Anthony, anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
Just wanted to say thank you all for being here for this incredible talk back. Sorry, virtual discussion. Talkbacks happen after a movie. We didn't do that part. Anyway, just wanted to let you all know, if you're not aware, that the cinemas are currently dark until October 3rd because we are in the middle of a 4K upgrade, new picture We got new sound going in there. So a lot of movies starting in October are going to have the feel that there's new life in them. We come back with Joker Follow You Do on one screen on October 3rd, and we'll have that for a couple of weeks. And on the other screen, we will have a combination of Purple Rain, The Wizard of Oz, Young Frankenstein, and Ghostbusters, all in 4K. And Kathy, one thing I should mention, the Young Soul Rebels, that will be a 4K restoration that we will play, and that is going to look pretty breathtaking on December 1st. So, yeah, very excited for that. So now you really got to see the movie because it's going to look better than it ever has. So, Franny, Alessandra, Kathy, thank you all for being here. Sarah, thank you as well. We hope you've enjoyed this. This will be online on YouTube shortly, and you can check it out again. So have a good one, everybody. Take care.